Vart, Wisconsin. A Westfield Jerry Selbee. Vart, Michigan. Vart, Michigan, the air hangs thick and sweet, smelling perpetually of stale coffee grounds and gasoline fumes near Main Street. Sunlight catches dust motes dancing above a counter stacked high with brightly colored cigarette packs, casting an amber sheen across the peeling linoleum floor. Jerry Selby's calloused hand reaches out to smooth down a stack of lottery tickets while Marge keeps her gaze fixed on the ledger. The ink staining her fingertips like dried blood, the question hangs unspoken in that small shop. Can two people, tethered by decades of shared history and routine, ever break free from the gravitational pull of good enough? Along Main Street in this quiet town of 1,900 souls, the Selbee operation was more than commerce, it was the bedrock. They raised 6 children here, a steady stream of tiny lives demanding sustenance and stability. Jerry managed the hard edge, the liquor inventory, quick cash transactions of cigarettes, while Marge orchestrated the softer side, meticulously tallying every sale and assembling the perfect midday sandwich. This rhythm, this predictable dance between product and profit, was their universe. Their life in Vart felt less like a narrative and more like an immutable geological layer, solid, dependable, yet suffocatingly unchanging. This relentless stability whispered of a deeper fear. That comfort itself was just another gilded cage. Vart, Michigan. The air hangs thick with the smell of stale fryer grease and gasoline fumes beneath a single, tireless traffic signal. 6 children's laughter echoes off the brick facade of Main Street, momentarily shattering the predictable drone of machinery from the nearby factory. Jerry Selbee, 62 years old, leans against the counter, his knuckles white as he grips a pack of Marlboros. Marge, 63, meticulously stacks sandwiches. Her movements, economical practiced over decades, except the story doesn't end there. Can sheer inertia truly anchor a life? In Vart, Michigan, that forgotten pocket of 1,900 souls, the Selby's world was built on the routine. Marge kept the ledger balanced while Jerry managed the thirsty hands reaching for liquor and cigarettes. This quiet commerce represented more than just income. It was their definition of stability against the slow erosion of time itself, a steady pulse in a fading town. The weight settling on them wasn't debt or disaster, not immediately. It was simply a restlessness, a profound ache beneath the surface of suburban contentment. For Jerry Selbee and Marge, after years of nurturing 6 children and running their local convenience store, they felt it time to break the mold. Main Street, Michigan. Sunlight slices through the dusty glass of the corner store window, illuminating floating motes above stacks of Marlboro cartons and brightly colored lottery scratch-offs. At 62, Jerry Selbee is wiping down the chipped mahogany counter, his brow furrowed less by fatigue than by a quiet, simmering dissatisfaction with the routine. Marge, at 63, is precisely arranging slices of processed turkey onto a sesame seed bun. Except this story doesn't end there. Can an obsession with pure mathematics rewrite the script of a simple life? Vart, Michigan. The clatter of change being counted, a dull thunk against the metal cash drawer, is the soundtrack to their existence. Jerry handles the hard goods, the liquor bottles stacked like patient soldiers, the cigarettes neatly bundled, while Marge meticulously balances the books beneath the counter, her fingers stained faintly pink from handling strawberry jam. This daily accounting is what keeps the system running smoothly for them, but watching the predictable ebb and flow of customer transactions, a deeper ache surfaces, a yearning to transcend the ledger itself. The morning in 2003 breaks with that familiar hum, yet something shifts when Jerry walks back inside from a supply run. A brochure lies carelessly discarded near the soda fountain, a vibrant splash of color against the beige tile floor, advertising Windfall. As his eyes track the intricate graphic of the game's payout structure, the gears in Jerry Selby's head begin to grind with sudden, intense purpose, signaling that this ordinary store is about to become a proving ground. The faded paper of the brochure flutters against Jerry Selby's hand, catching the weak, dusty sunlight filtering through the grimy window of the corner store. Inside, Marge stands near the counter, her expression a quiet blend of contentment and calculation. At 63, she understands the subtle mathematics of waiting. Except this story doesn't end there. Can pure intellect truly rewrite the odds? In his mind, Jerry Selbee, a man whose degree from Western Michigan University was more than just parchment, immediately began dissecting the fine print of the new game called Windfall. He didn't just see numbers, he saw potential energy coiled within a structure, recognizing in mere minutes that this iteration possessed a mathematical singularity, a unique flaw or advantage waiting to be exploited. At the heart of Windfall lies the roll down, a mechanic so elegant it felt deliberate. Unlike the slow, towering ambition of games like Mega Millions, where fortunes hang precariously on a perfect 6-number match, here should the jackpot stall at $5 million without a winner, that colossal sum doesn't vanish into a void. It cascades downward, dramatically inflating the prizes for those who manage to secure 4 or 3 matches. The Fluorescent lights at the corner store buzz overhead, casting a sickly yellow sheen across dusty shelves crammed with stale candy bars and faded advertisements. Jerry spots it, a glossy brochure for Windfall, an impossible promise printed on cheap paper. He doesn't just see marketing, he sees variables waiting to be solved. Does the relentless gravity of pure chance ever yield to logic? In an instant, his mind snaps into focus, a rapid-fire calculation kicking gears in a head trained by Western Michigan University. The brochure detailed the roll down, but Jerry zeroes in on how it functioned. When the jackpot stalls at $5 million without a winner, the money cascades downward. This wasn't just a prize pool, it was an accelerating multiplier engine. At the local store counter, he mentally allocates precisely 1,100 tickets. He defies convention, betting across 6 lines instead of 5 for his quick mental math check. With that audacious bet, Jerry predicts a return greater than his initial outlay, a proof delivered in pure arithmetic. In Augusta, Georgia, under the fluorescent hum of the ticket kiosk light, a number glows red, 5,000. The announcement hangs heavy in the humid air. The jackpot has hit $5 million, and yet silence reigns where celebration should be. This roll-down feature is the fulcrum of everything. It's the safety net that prevents the colossal prize from dissolving into nothingness. Except this story doesn't end there. How does one leverage a statistical certainty to transform mere hope into absolute profit? On the floor of the same store, Jerry Selbee mentally partitions his 1,100 wager before even touching the scanner. He calculates not against the expected 5-number match rate, but divides by 6 instead, anticipating an aggressive yield of 18 or 19 3-number winners. This preemptive arithmetic proved true. A singular 4-number win nets him 1,000,000, though 18 subsequent $30 matches bring in another one. A clean return on investment, 1,900 from a 1,100 outlay. When the official rolldown was confirmed for his next play, Jerry moves with predatory focus, his hands suddenly steady as they grip the stack of tickets. He commits 30,600 and immediately pulls out with 6,300, an undeniable success. But he doesn't pause there. Against a backdrop of skeptical cashier eyes, he doubles down, raising the wager to a massive 8,000, poised on the very edge of nearly doubling his stake over once more. Chapter 1, Fluorescent Lights Promise Jackpot. The fluorescent lights at the ticket kiosk hum a thin, high note over a mountain of numbered slips. Jerry Selbee stares down at the screen, the promise of the numbers flickering like a digital siren song. He has already calculated that 100 should net him one 4-number winner, a clean $1,000, but he divides it by 6 instead of 57 driven by a quick, dirty mental math flash that screams 18. Can this small deviation from the prescribed system be the hinge upon which his fortune swings? Inside the brightly lit confines of the lotto office, Jerry executes his revised gamble. He doesn't expect perfect alignment, he expects approximation. The numbers fall, and with a visceral jolt, he sees it. 18 3-number winners chime into existence, each valued at $50. That single variance nets him an additional $900 on top of the initial 1,000 from the 4-number match. At the moment that second cascade begins, the atmosphere cracks open. A roll-down is announced, a seismic event in this small corner of prosperity. Jerry Selbee explodes into action. He immediately pours $3,600 into Windfall tickets and pulls back a staggering $6,300. He has tasted the sweetness of the win, and now, against the cautionary glance of John Wertheim, he pushes further, staking a monumental 8,000, doubling his stake. In Detroit, under the fluorescent hum of the state lottery terminal, a colossal sheet of metal descends like an avalanche, each numbered circle clicking into place with relentless finality. Jerry springs forward from his worn plastic chair, propelled by an instinct owned over years of statistical obsession. His breath catches in his throat as he watches the mechanism grind toward its conclusion. Except this story doesn't end there. Can one man truly map the chaotic elegance of chance itself? At the Michigan State Lottery office, a decisive moment arrives when Jerry commits $3,600 to the spinning void, and immediately, the payoff floods back. A staggering $6,000 lands in his account. John Wertheim watches this surge with a mixture of awe and skepticism, recognizing the fever pitch of obsession radiating off the protagonist. But for Jerry, that initial victory is merely confirmation. It's not the end of the game, but the opening salvo. Inside the same hushed terminal area, the stakes escalate brutally upward as Jerry commits another $8,000 to the draw. The numbers spin faster now, a frantic ballet of potential wealth against his own nerve. He pushes so far past prudence that doubling his capital becomes an almost unbelievable possibility. How does one risk everything and still feel like they are in control? The fluorescent lights of the Michigan State Lottery office hum with a high, thin whine, casting sickly yellow reflections across the polished linoleum floor. John Wertheim stares at his wife, Marge Selbee, catching a flicker of nervous anticipation in her eyes as he prepares to drop another substantial wager into the machine. At what point does one admit they found something more than just good luck? Except this story doesn't end there. Can sheer pattern recognition truly dismantle an entire state-backed gamble? that same tense room, Jerry leans forward, his knuckles white against the green plastic console. He finally voices the quiet declaration. "I think I've cracked the Michigan State Lottery." The air thickens instantly. A palpable weight settles over the onlookers as they process this bold claim. Marge Selbee offers no shock, merely a serene, almost knowing nod, suggesting that her intuition already knew the architecture of his success was flawed. Outside the confines of the terminal itself, across the polished expanse of the waiting area, the unspoken evidence stands ready to back up Jerry's theory. Marge Selbee's certainty stems from what she has observed. As long as nobody else strikes gold and someone, Jerry, is consistently walking away with winnings, the underlying mathematical currents are visible. This isn't chance, it's a pattern waiting to be decoded. Chapter 2, Suppressed Chaos of Kiosks. A fluorescent hum above the ticket kiosks in the Michigan State Lottery headquarters seems to vibrate with suppressed chaos. Stacks of colored paper, each one a desperate prayer printed on cheap cardstock, tower near the intake scanner, and Jerry stares at the screen, his knuckles white against the cool plastic housing. He whispers the words again, "I think I've cracked the Michigan State Lottery," as if daring the very machine to argue with him. At this precise moment, Marge Selbee observes this quiet declaration from a nearby leather bench, her expression unreadable beneath the harsh overhead lights. She doesn't need proof. She already sees it in the pattern of the numbers flickering across the display. Because, as she knows intimately, while millions might be throwing darts blindfolded, winning money gives you an undeniable blueprint to the chaos. In this solitary realization, this moment when Jerry grasps he is alone on this intellectual mountain peak, what does that feeling taste like? It's not just triumph, it's isolation. John Wertheim asks him, and the weight of being the sole discoverer hangs heavy in the air, promising a victory so singular it borders on madness. In the quiet hum of the betting lounge in Las Vegas, Marge Selbee watches the digital display flicker, a cascade of probabilities painting an impossible tapestry. She shakes her head, a slow, almost weary gesture, no surprise flickers across her face, only grim confirmation. For her, seeing the relentless churn of the numbers is simply proof that the system was rigged, yet still winnable. In that immediate aftermath, John Wertheim leans in, his voice a low, gravelly current against the sterile air. "So when you realize there aren't a million people that have discovered this," he prompts, forcing Jerry Selbee to meet the gaze, "it's pretty much just you. What's that feeling like? The weight of singular discovery hangs heavy in the pressurized room. How does one feel when the secret map is held only by your own two hands?" Across the gleaming mahogany desk, Jerry and Marge Selbee immediately pivot from observation to execution. They begin playing not for pocket change, but for hundreds of thousands of dollars. This wasn't a casual hobby anymore, it was war. Jerry establishes GS investment strategies, transforming their hunch into a formidable, tangible entity whose record books soon stack up like monuments to sheer mathematical defiance. Sugar Ray's caffeine acute. The smell of burnt sugar and stale coffee hangs heavy in the air, clinging like cheap cologne to the worn vinyl booths. Stacks upon stacks of ledger books are spread across a nearby table, each one whispering tales of exponential growth. These aren't just numbers, they are solidified proof that the system is fallible. Jerry Selbee stares at them, his jaw tight, the weight of their newfound fortune pressing down on him like physical pressure. As John Wertheim gently probes the silence, asking what it feels like to be the singular discoverer in a sea of mediocrity, Jerry doesn't hesitate. He has seen enough evidence. The sheer volume of winnings documented within those books confirms the anomaly is real, and he cannot afford to let this insight remain a private victory. Dave Huff sits across from James White, his hands, callous from years at the machine and tool shop, resting flat on the sticky tabletop like anchors in a turbulent sea. The stakes aren't measured solely in dollars, they are measured in future opportunities. This windfall wasn't just profit, it was liberation purchased one corporate share at a time. The Gerber brothers, Lauren and Ray, lean back near the window, their farming hands slightly reddened from the sun, viewing this investment not as speculation, but as bedrock. Dave Huff admits to James White that this financial tide lifted him out of precarious ground, securing education for 3 children and finally funding one through law school. The scent of sawdust and hot metal hangs heavy in Dave Huff's machine shop, a tangible cloud of industry clinging to everything. Sunlight slices through grimy panes, illuminating motes dancing above an ancient lathe, the very machine that powered his ascent. He watches it turn slow and relentless, just as he watched the small bills stack up. Each one a promise whispered into the economic wind, except this story doesn't end there. Can simple craftsmanship ever truly outmaneuver the invisible levers of fortune? In this crucible of creation, Dave Huff found more than just profit. He built scaffolding for his future. He didn't just earn money, he engineered opportunity, pouring that hard-won revenue into the education of 3 children and 1 student destined for the hallowed halls of law school. His shop wasn't a business, it was an engine of generational escape. Across the square, James White observes this small triumph with a knowing nod. He hears the hushed conversations filtering out from his own office, the local consensus acknowledging the anomaly. The townspeople know something shifted in Dave Huff's trajectory, a quiet certainty settling over them like dust after a busy day of turning metal. Detroit Square. Dust motes dance in the slanted afternoon sunbeams cutting through the grime-streaked windows of Jerry's club. The air is thick, smelling faintly of stale coffee and desperate hope. 3 state troopers, their uniforms stiff against the worn wooden booths, watch a roll of dice clatter across the table like miniature, gleaming pronouncements. This wasn't just gambling, this was a calculated assault on probability itself. The surface problem, the relentless pursuit of impossible wins in Windfall, was clear. Take the system's predictable grind and bend it until it screams. Yet beneath that manic excitement hummed a deeper current, a desperate need to claw back dignity from the jaws of routine. Can sheer nerve, armed with pattern recognition, ever truly conquer institutionalized chance? In spring 2005, Jerry's club held 25 adherents, a microcosm of local ambition. Among them sat a factory plant manager and a bank vice president, men accustomed to controlling flowcharts, now betting on random spin. They had played Windfall 12 times, racking up millions, until Michigan itself decided the game was over due to lack of sales. In Michigan, by the spring of 2005, Jerry's club swelled to 25 members. These were not casual gamblers, men who smelled opportunity like vultures circling carrion meat. These willing participants included 3 state troopers whose badges whispered authority, a factory plant manager accustomed to quotas, and a bank vice president who navigated fortunes daily. They had played Windfall 12 times, their collective luck yielding millions in winnings, a clear signal that the odds were stacked favorably against the house. Chapter 4: Michigan Game Shutdown. The air thickens with unspoken certainty. The system was demonstrably flawed. Then Michigan itself made the dramatic pronouncement. It shut down the game. The official reason cited was a lack of sales, as if market saturation, the very proof of its success, could somehow be a deficit. How long before you realized that this closure wasn't an end, but merely a relocation of the battlefield? In Massachusetts, a parallel victory already lay waiting, shimmering like distant dawn across the Atlantic. John Wortham knew precisely where to look next. He suspected another game presented odds so favorable, they were almost insulting. Was the system truly collapsing under its own weight, or was it simply shifting gears, ready to roll up its sleeves and try to stop this inevitable tide of fortune? The air inside Jerry's club hangs thick with stale cigarette smoke and metallic tang of old coins. 12 times they've stared down the odds on Windfall, watching millions accumulate in their collective bankroll. 3 state troopers, a factory plant manager, and a bank vice president. These were not casual gamblers. These were architects of risk, each one ready to bet a substantial piece of their carefully managed life savings. How long before they understood that this streak wasn't luck? In the early spring of 2005, the precarious ecosystem of Jerry's club reached its zenith, swelling to exactly 25 dedicated members willing to press the high stakes. This perfect little community, these hopeful supplicants, had repeatedly proven their mastery over Michigan's lottery mechanism. And then, with a bureaucratic sigh that sounded deafeningly final, the state itself shuttered the game, citing a baffling lack of sales for its celebrated fortunes. On the other side of the country, in Massachusetts, the scent of possibility was already rising. A member reached out to Jerry Selbee via email, a digital whisper across the miles. Massachusetts has a game called Cash Windfall. Do you think we could play that? This wasn't just a suggestion, it was an urgent plea for salvation from the collapsing fortunes back home. Michigan. The fluorescent lights hum a sterile, high-pitched whine above the betting windows as John Wortham watches the board freeze. The Michigan game, that Titan matchup everyone had staked their reputation on, is suddenly locked down, an insurmountable digital wall slamming into view. He feels the familiar knot tighten in his stomach, the sensation of almost grasping victory slipping through his fingers like wet sand. Except this story doesn't end there. How does one find another crack in the system when the primary gate has slammed shut? Boston. A single email notification blazes across Jerry Selbee's inbox, an unexpected digital beacon cutting through the day-to-day noise of the operation. One of his players writes back with a hopeful query. Massachusetts has a game called Cash Windfall. Do you think we could play that? The request lands not as a simple suggestion, but as a lifeline thrown into a rapidly darkening sea of uncertainty for them all. Westfield. Jerry Selbee leans forward, the glow of his computer screen casting sharp shadows across his face. He dives into the code, meticulously cross-referencing probabilities and historical payout structures until he has enough data to speak with certainty. We can play that game, he confirms back through the screen, a simple declaration that feels like a seismic shift in their strategy, pivoting them toward an unseen advantage. Westfield. A single email lands in a crowded inbox, a digital breadcrumb leading away from routine into pure, glittering chats. One of the players whispers the name, Cash Windfall. The question hangs heavy in the air, demanding an answer beyond hopeful guesswork. Can this game truly beat the house? Westfield Jerry Selbee's fingers hover over the keyboard, pausing before the enter key. He doesn't just click, he dives. The computer screen becomes a portal, sucking him into the mathematical labyrinth of Cash Windfall, where every line number represents either hope or statistical absurdity. Down at John Wertheim's desk, the phone rings with news. Another victory confirmed. "We got another winner," the voice declares. While Wertheim's focus tightens, demanding precision, how long did it take Jerry Selbee to find that mathematical sweet spot, proving a positive return was not just luck? Chapter 5, Mahogany Desk Confrontation. In a cramped office in Boston, surrounded by stacks of official lottery printouts, Jerry Selbee stared back across the polished mahogany expanse at John Wertheim. The confirmation was already ringing out. "We got another winner." But it wasn't enough. This time felt different. He had found the scene, the mathematical flaw that offered something more than just a lucky guess. But what does one person do when they glimpse a hidden lever in the machine, knowing that true victory demands not luck, but grueling obsession? In Massachusetts, the pursuit crystallized. Selby's established their siege, a routine measured in hundreds of miles driven, always toward the next advertised roll down. They didn't just attend, they assaulted the game, purchasing hundreds of thousands of tickets across 2 local convenience stores. This was not casual patronage, this was mobilization. On the humble confines of the Red Roof Inn, beneath the thin veneer of hospitality, Jerry and Marge Selbee locked themselves into a Sisyphean task for 10 hours each day, straight through 10 days. They weren't playing the lottery anymore. They were mining it by hand, meticulously sorting those mountains of paper, turning probability from an abstract concept into tangible, countable grit. The fluorescent hum inside the Red Roof Inn room seems to vibrate right through the cheap carpet, a relentless buzz mirroring the frantic calculations happening on the table. Hundreds of tickets, paper ghosts promising fortunes, are spread out in overlapping grids, illuminated by the harsh glow of a desk lamp. Jerry and Marge Selbee aren't watching the draw, they are wrestling it into submission. This wasn't luck, this was siege warfare against pure chance. In the upstairs portion of the barn, among stacked crates smelling faintly of hay dust and old diesel, Marge recalls the precarious initial storage, a sense of imminent structural collapse hanging over their hull. When the floor groaned beneath the weight of those tickets, she moved them down to the pole barn, a cavernous space where the odds themselves felt heavier, piled high in what must have been 60 or 65 tubs. Outside this makeshift command center, John Wertheim leans back slightly, a slight smile playing on his lips as he presses for details from the tireless pair. "How long did it take you this time to figure out that you could get a positive return here?" His question hangs in the air, demanding an answer beyond simple hope. It demands proof. A single pallet stacks high in the pole barn, the cardboard edges stained yellowed by humidity. Inside, hundreds of thousands of lottery tickets wait like silent, expectant soldiers for inspection. The air hangs thick and heavy, a scent of stale coffee and aged paper, as Marge Selbee stares at a towering stack, her knuckles white against the corrugated metal siding. This relentless dedication to the random roll, was it pure luck they were chasing, or something more deeply woven into the fabric of their retirement? In the barn upstairs, amid stacks reaching toward the rafters, Marge had first organized the chaos, yet even that temporary order felt fragile, ticking clock waiting for collapse. Fear, tangible and cold, settled in her gut when she realized the floor beneath the massive piles was beginning to sag. This wasn't just about winning big, it was about keeping their dream from collapsing under its own weight. Across the expanse of tickets, Jerry and Marge maintained a punishing routine. 900 miles drove every time a rollover threatened their hull. They weren't merely buying tickets at convenience stores in Massachusetts. They were accumulating evidence for an argument against fate itself, turning leisure into exhaustive labor just to stave off boredom's crushing victory. The scent of dry hay and old cardboard hangs thick in the air, clinging to the rafters above. 65 tubs stacked high like brittle, yellowed monuments to obsession, grown under their own weight on the upstairs barn floor. Suddenly, Marge Selbee's hand freezes mid-reach. She looks down at the warped planks, a hairline fracture spiderwebbing across the aged wood. A low, sickening creak tells them everything. This victory might not be stable enough to hold it all up. Chapter 6, Wrestling Towering Evidence. Holborn, Massachusetts, the shift is immediate, jarring. They wrestle the towering stacks of evidence, the winning tickets, down from the unstable perch and into the cavernous safety of the pole barn. These boxes represent more than just numbers. They are the physical manifestation of their gamble against the odds. John Wertheim glances back at the precarious stack above, a silent acknowledgement passing between the men that this monumental haul is fragile. Massachusetts. The road hums with low, persistent vibration beneath them while they drive toward another hopeful jackpot. "I'm supposed to be retired here," Marge Selbee murmurs, the phrase tasting like a heavy sigh against the window glass. But every agonizing 14-hour stretch across state lines is overshadowed by the profound satisfaction of proving their tenacity, proving that this pursuit was not just for them, but for every friend and family member watching from home. Boston, Massachusetts. The interior of the aging sedan smells faintly of stale coffee and vinyl seat-creased dust. John Wertheim grips the steering wheel, knuckles white against the worn plastic as the GPS voice repeats its monotonous promise. Destination in sight. He glances beside him at Jerry Selbee, a faint sheen of sweat catching the afternoon sunlight on his brow, a picture of weary dedication. They were making 14-hour drives just to chase that elusive jackpot. The surface problem was simple enough, massive ticket volume. But beneath the miles and the endless highway hum, there was a deeper ache, wasn't there? It was the quiet desperation that gnaws at you when effort outpaces reward. They needed more than just money. They craved validation. Could this relentless pursuit finally prove their worth to themselves, to everyone who doubted them? Boston Globe offices. A crisp, digital notification flashes across a journalist's screen. A tip arrives, a whisper of anomaly amidst the noise. Suddenly, the extraordinary volume of cash windfall tickets being sold in specific Massachusetts locations ceases to be routine. It becomes evidence. It's an accusation stamped onto paper. The fluorescent lights of the print room in Salem buzz with a sickly yellow hum, casting long, distorted shadows across stacks of paper smelling faintly of ink and old ambition. Scott Allen watches the conveyor belt move past, each ticket bearing the logo of Cash Windfall flashing by like a tiny glittering promise. He knows deep down that these slips aren't random, they are evidence of a mathematical trap waiting to be sprung. Except this story doesn't end with a single big payout, it ends with a systemic unraveling. Can sheer pattern recognition ever conquer institutional greed? The crisp digital notification in the Boston Globe offices is not merely an alert. It's a siren call cutting through the routine drone of deadlines. A tip arrives, a whisper turns shout that confirms what smart people like Scott Allen already suspected. In certain locales across Massachusetts, these cash windfall tickets are being liquidated at volumes so staggering they defy natural probability. In Gloucester, amidst the salty tang of the Atlantic air mixing with the scent of cheap printer toner, the volume is almost obscene. Scott Allen's theory solidified. If you purchase enough of these specific slips, you don't just hope to win. You guarantee a return greater than your initial outlay. He has found the mathematical backdoor into the lottery's closed ledger. Boston Globe headquarters. Dust motes dance in the single shaft of afternoon sun slicing across a mahogany desk. Stacks of meticulously organized financial reports teeter precariously near an open ledger. And suddenly, digital notification flashes, a beacon of anomaly amidst the paper trail. The system is being exploited. And this story doesn't end there. It forces us to ask, when the mathematics of chance are bent by human ingenuity, can anyone truly cheat fate? Michigan. The air here smells like damp loam and old motor oil clinging to weathered siding. Scott Allen, overseeing the Globe's legendary Spotlight team, watches the data bloom on his monitors. He sees an unnatural surge, statistical fever rising across various Massachusetts locales. It becomes clear, smart people have figured out the secret code of the cash windfall ticket. Buying enough guarantees a return greater than the initial stake. Chapter 7, Shadow of MIT Looms. Cambridge, Massachusetts, the shadow of MIT looms large over this financial frenzy where two armies clash for supremacy. On one side, the gritty determination of the Selbee gang from Evart marshals their forces. On the other, young, brilliant syndicates composed of math majors barely old enough to be the Selbees' grandchildren begin to challenge the established pattern. How did they keep getting away with it? Michigan. The glossy ink of a winning ticket still smells faintly of ozone and possibility. It is an intoxicating perfume that clings to the rough denim of Scott Allen's jacket. He watches the ticker tape scroll by across the Globe's bullpen window, a relentless cascade of improbable payouts, and knows the secret equation. Buy enough, always win back more than you spent. Except this story doesn't end with a single lucky pull. It asks, does obsession conquer statistical inevitability? Cambridge, Massachusetts. The shadow of MIT looms large over this financial frenzy where two armies clash for dominance in cash windfall. These titans are not simply gamblers, they are architects who reverse engineered the game itself. Scott Allen's own investigative team, the Spotlight crew, confirmed that the Selbee gang from Evart was locked in a brutal turf war against a sophisticated syndicate born from undergraduate ambition. MIT campus quad. A young man, fueled by caffeine and pure mathematical arrogance, discovered the pattern during his independent study project. It was an undeniable proof of concept. He didn't just find the cheat code, he weaponized it, pulling friends into the fold until they too became professional players, funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into this high-stakes digital arena. Evart, Michigan. Fluorescent lights buzz sickly above worn oak tables, casting a jaundiced sheen across stacks of betting slips thick with hopeful ink. The air hangs heavy, smelling like stale coffee grounds and desperate ambition. Two forces are locked in a silent, relentless siege over the massive prize pool of cash windfall. But what drives these titans, the gritty Selbee gang or the sleek MIT syndicate? And is victory merely about better math? MIT campus quad. Scott Allen, still an undergraduate, stares down at a cascade of probability charts spread across his desk, the numbers seeming to writhe under his gaze like trapped insects. This wasn't guesswork, this was deduction. He didn't just see patterns in the cash wins, he saw the underlying architecture of the game itself. Art, Michigan. Suddenly, Scott Allen doesn't play alone anymore. He weaponizes his knowledge, rallying a coterie of friends, his initial investors, turning an academic curiosity into a professional machine. Their bets swell, metastasizing from small wagers to multi-$100,000 commitments, chasing the exact same elusive rate of return as their rivals. A mahogany table gleams under the harsh fluorescent lights of the university lounge in Ivart. Scattered across its surface are stacks of betting slips, slick paper maps charting victory and ruin. A collective breath is held, a collective hope clinging to the thin veneer of chance. Scott Allen's initial theory has proven volatile. He isn't just calculating odds anymore, he's building an army of believers. Except this story doesn't end there. How much faith can one man convince others to pour onto a single table? In Ivart, Michigan, the quiet intensity shifts from solitary calculation to orchestrated frenzy as Scott Allen recruits his friends, transforming a study group into a nascent betting syndicate. This initial pool of capital, drawn from youthful ambition and late-night debates, soon acts as fertile ground for exponential growth. The early wins prove not just lucky streaks, but demonstrable mathematical certainty. Because the first successes felt too clean to be random, the believers began whispering about scaling up the operation. Across 7 relentless years, the syndicate blossoms into something formidable. Their bets on cash windfalls swell from modest undergraduate contributions into a staggering commitment of between $17. This sustained aggression yielded profits totaling no less than $3, $5 million, a rate of return that mirrors the legendary stability of the Selbees themselves. Chapter 8. Besieged Treasurer's Desk. Boston. The mahogany desk of the Massachusetts State Treasurer is suddenly besieged by paperwork, a stack thick enough to stop a charging bull. A sharp metallic beep echoes through the marble hall, the sound of an audit alarm blaring red against the quiet hum of fiscal responsibility. This investigation, spearheaded by Greg Sullivan, feels less like routine review and more like a siege beginning. But what truly drove this crackdown? Except this story doesn't end there. Can one collective genius truly outmaneuver the monolithic system itself? The MIT group, those brilliant minds from Cambridge, staked their fortunes against cash windfall for 7 consecutive years. They didn't just play, they waged war on the odds, successfully netting a minimum of $3 in profit during that grueling span. This return rate, a near-perfect mirror to what the Selbees had achieved, suggests not luck, but cold, hard mathematical dominion. In Tallahassee, Greg Sullivan officially shutters the cash windfall game, signaling the end of an era and the commencement of a high-stakes reckoning. A system that was supposed to regulate, stabilize, and police this casino-backed lottery has been forcibly brought to a halt. How could they have managed to extract such staggering wealth while operating under state oversight? Taller than any spire in Lansing, a massive mahogany desk sits under a single, unforgiving fluorescent light. Spread across its surface are stacks of betting slips, crisp white rectangles detailing millions wagered on the state lottery. Suddenly, a piercing, rhythmic beeping erupts from an unseen monitor, the sound of the system alerting someone to a statistical anomaly. Except this story doesn't end there. If the numbers themselves aren't lying, what impossible equation is being solved? In Tallahassee, the Massachusetts State Treasurer officially shutters the cash windfall game, sealing its fate under investigation. Public perception had already curdled into certainty. These staggering millions weren't just luck, they smelled of organized crime, deep rot within the state apparatus. The initial assumption was corruption, a quiet conspiracy thriving behind closed doors. A subsequent probe, spearheaded by Greg Sullivan as State Inspector General, became an excavation of secrets. Subpoenas flew like feathered arrows across the Commonwealth, and dozens of individuals were pulled in for intensive interviews, all driven by a singular hypothesis, that something fundamentally illegal had stained the game's ledger. The fluorescent lights in the Massachusetts Treasury office hum a sickly, high-pitched note, casting long, sterile shadows across stacks of brittle paperwork. A single sheaf of documents sits before Greg Sullivan, his corner dog-eared from too many hands. It represents millions wagered on state lottery tickets. The very air tastes like old toner and sudden dread as the game, Cash Windfall, is formally shut down. Except this story doesn't end there. How do you find the monster when you thought you were looking for a mobster? In Tallahassee, Greg Sullivan's initial suspicion was cemented by the public outcry. They demanded answers beyond mere chance. The prevailing narrative suggested something rotten festered beneath the surface. Organized crime, illicit backroom deals, perhaps even outright corruption poisoning the state's finances. So began the deep dive. Subpoenas were issued like tactical strikes across the administrative landscape. Within those echoing halls of power, Greg Sullivan's team didn't stop at the surface rumors. They dug deeper than anyone expected. They interviewed dozens, a silent parade of witnesses, and meticulously examined every document, all under the guiding hypothesis that a monumental act of illegal maneuvering had taken place within the state machine. A stale cigarette smoke hangs heavy in the air of the briefing room in Raleigh. A stack of sealed subpoenas sits on the mahogany table, brittle edges catching the harsh fluorescent glare. The initial assumption that some shadowy syndicate was running the show feels almost too neat for this level of staggering wealth. Except this story doesn't end with a mobster handshake. It asks, could genius be more subversive than greed? In Raleigh, when Greg Sullivan and his investigators first descended upon the state lottery data, they were braced for organized crime. They expected the familiar stain of public corruption dripping from every municipal seal. They marshaled subpoenas like siege weaponry, poring over mountains of paper until the hypothesis that something illegal had occurred felt less like a guess and more like an established fact. Chapter 9, or overfound evidence. Across the table in Raleigh, John Wertheim watched the evidence accumulate, his expression shifting from guarded skepticism to genuine awe. What they found wasn't some brute force graft, it was a calculated, beautiful defiance of probability, leaving investigators stunned by how these math nerd geniuses had engineered a legal path to millions. The fluorescent lights hum over the mahogany expanse, casting a sickly yellow sheen across scattered printouts of probability trees. Greg Sullivan leans back slightly, his knuckles white against the polished wood, as John Wertheim stares at him. A man who expected shadows and mobsters. The air hangs thick with stale coffee and disbelief. What they found wasn't organized crime, but something far more elegant, more infuriatingly brilliant. In Raleigh, the initial hunt for violent syndicates felt like a desperate sweep of a dusty attic, searching for a single hidden ledger. Yet, Sullivan's team mapped out the statistical anomalies. They didn't just find evidence, they unearthed mathematical gods operating within the official mechanism. How could these math nerd geniuses have engineered an entirely legal path to millions? The final revelation hit like a perfectly thrown dart into the heart of a system. Even when high-volume betting flooded the field, it made no discernible difference to the core odds. Consequently, when the jackpot crested that critical roll-down threshold, cash windfall didn't just become a good bet. It became an undeniable inevitability for everyone. A statistical lifeboat built right into the Massachusetts State Lottery itself. Boston. Under the fluorescent hum of the Massachusetts State Lottery headquarters, the screens glowed with dizzying arrays of numbers, a digital river flowing relentlessly toward a single jackpot payout. Suddenly, the investigation team stopped breathing. They were dumbfounded by the sheer elegance of what these math nerd geniuses had accomplished. The statistical anomaly wasn't just luck, it was calculated defiance against the tyranny of probability. In Concord, where the lottery's intricate gears turned, investigators confirmed that no single player's chances were skewed by the massive influx of wagers. High-volume betting, the kind driven by giants like the Selbees, was a distraction, a loud roar in the machine's ear. But it was precisely this volume that made the cash windfall option suddenly irresistible to everyone involved. The system itself began its subtle drift toward obsolescence when the jackpot finally dipped below that critical roll-down threshold. It wasn't long before Massachusetts State Lottery pivoted to another game entirely, but those 9 years of calculated assaults had already netted their homegrown company a staggering $26 million in gross revenue. In Evart, Massachusetts, the stale air inside the living room still smells faintly of cinnamon and fried chicken. Sunlight cuts through dusty blinds, illuminating a worn patch of hardwood where Marge sets down a cooling pie dish, steam rising like a temporary white ghost. The silence is only punctuated by the clatter of cheap poker chips, the sound of victory tempered by reality. Except this story doesn't end there. Can sheer luck overcome the cold, hard logic of probability? In Evart, that smell of success was intrinsically tied to the mathematics of chance. When the jackpot finally crossed the critical roll-down threshold, the Massachusetts State Lottery didn't just offer a prize, it offered a genuine opportunity for everyone, even those who weren't the high-stakes titans like the Selbees. This meant cash windfall became a palpable beacon, a good bet for every single soul gathered around that table. But the momentum shifted. The system itself, having provided its statistical climax, moved on. Massachusetts State Lottery pivoted to an entirely different game, leaving behind the familiar twist of the previous mechanism. 9 years dissolved into a ledger showing over $26 million gross by the homegrown company, nearly $8 million banked as profit before taxes. Wisconsin. Dust motes hang heavy in the air above a chipped Formica countertop, illuminated by the sickly yellow glow of an overhead fixture. 9 years. That's how long this improbable streak has been running. 9 seasons of hopeful ink marks across paper tickets. Cumulative gross over $26 million. A number that settles on the tongue like fine, expensive grit. Except this story doesn't end with a flashing digital jackpot. It ends with chicken pot pie. Can a life built on chance truly anchor itself against the tide of relentless possibility? The sheer weight of nearly $8 million in profit before taxes, it's not abstract wealth when you are staring at cracked paint and aging shingles. That massive haul didn't vanish into speculative stocks or yachts. It found immediate, tangible purpose in the small town. It went straight to the foundation of their lives, renovating the very house that witnessed the initial hopeful scribbles on those tickets. Now, where once fortunes were counted in seven-figure increments, they are measured by the clatter of chips during a nickel and dime poker night. Marge is still there, presiding over the table, her hands dusting crumbs from a perfectly browned chicken pot pie. The millions have been metabolized into memory, a tangible reward that proves grit can outmaneuver probability itself. Art. A town that whispers rather than shouts of wealth, a place whose landscape is more accustomed to steady harvest than blinding jackpot flares. Before taxes even stripped their skin, the Selbees netted nearly $8 million in pure profit, a mountain of possibilities settled into the quiet hum of Midwestern life. The question lingers, can the sheer gravitational pull of fortune be contained within a modest community? In Ivart, that massive inflow didn't trigger a sudden, glittering exodus to the coast. Instead, the Selbees anchored their prize to tangible roots. The family home began its slow, steady rebirth, brick by patient brick. This bounty was immediately channeled outward, ensuring education for 6 children, 14 grandchildren, and 10 great-grandchildren alike. The money hasn't bred arrogance, it has merely amplified their traditions. Instead of yachts docked in harbor, the grand gatherings now feature a nickel and dime poker night, and Marge ensures every shared moment is seasoned perfectly with chicken pot pie. It seems this small town possesses an almost stubborn talent for keeping its colossal secret safe. A polished mahogany desk gleams under the harsh fluorescent lights of a quiet office, reflecting back the weary lines etched around John Wertheim's eyes. He leans forward, his hands clasped as if gripping an invisible tether, listening to the cadence of the confession unfolding before him. Except this story doesn't end there. How does a small community manage to bury such immense wealth without letting it poison the soul? Montpelier, Vermont, John Wertheim pauses, letting the weight of the narrative settle in the heavy air. The speaker's delivery, measured, almost surgical, suggests not boastfulness, but deep-seated reverence for what they possess. This quiet restraint felt less like modesty and more like a deliberate act of guardianship over something sacred. John Wertheim presses further, recognizing the subtle cultural defense mechanism at play. He perceives it as an ingrained regional trait. He is struck by how profoundly this pocket of the country seems dedicated to keeping its monumental successes shrouded in comfortable silence.